series on the Nico Penguin YouTube, Twitch, Facebook page uh, for Productive Gamers by Gamer Nico Penguin. And today we have a guest who is a publisher, an author, a voice actor. We have Rod R. Garcia, who has done so much in such a small span of time. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us today.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. And just for those that don't know or didn't read the description, can you let us know your first gaming system?
I had an Atari uh, when I was 10. Still have a big screen now. I rigged it to work. It's fun. It's a part of the family.
That's actually pretty interesting that you started with an Atari gaming system, because I've heard down the pipeline that book that you just completed recently, the indGame, is based off of a game.
I broke up there. I did. Sorry.
Oh, so I was saying that your book recently that you released is based off of a game.
It is. It's actually based off of an entire neural reality game system. So it's like virtual reality, but it's neural reality. So when the character in the books plays the games, instead of playing a game like with a joystick, they're playing games or a paddle. They're actually jacked in, and the games are left in their head as memories. So it's a whole different system.
Ooh.
So, and I actually took that from some science fact. It's I was reading about that years ago. There's a company that's been actually testing how they could like implant memories in a non, conspiracy theory way, but
Wow, that's interesting.
with a gaming system, it sounded like it would be a natural fit.
Wow, it's almost like the Neuralink concept where you're pretty much gaming and then the game's memory is automatically in your brain or memory?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and the character in the books, um, he's been he's the inventor's the inventor of the platform. It's his son who's been
Ah.
playing the games, and Packard, the young man who's the main character, he's actually got. We find out pretty early in the books that he's got a degenerative disease that's been kind of slowly breaking down his ability to use his body. So he's a natural fit for this anyway. Mentally, he's completely there. So he's in there playing the games. He tests them for his dad, and it's his dad's way of keeping him involved in what he does. Um, so it allows him to be in the system, but still come back and function, in the outside world.
Wow, that's actually pretty intriguing that you were able to create this world when you started off of with an Atari, because a lot of people would say that the Atari is one of the most basic and simplest game systems, and to go from, a Pong kind of game, Super Mario Bros. Kind of system, all the way to having these big sophisticated words, kind of a game system where you're pretty much jacked in, and humor me this, if anything happens to the people that are in the game, does anything happen to them outside of the game?
No, it's a safe environment. Now, I mean, they might get frightened. They might have, I suppose that, I mean, if we're talking about it being in a real world, I suppose we could end up with nightmares, especially since the brain
Mm,
doesn't understand the difference between the real and
right, right.
you know, the artificial memories.
Huh, that's
It's
so
not meant to.
intriguing. Uh,
So
and where did you get this super fascination or this uh integration for gaming and writing and putting them all together? Because those are, people would say those are worlds apart, but you were able to incorporate it and make it almost into an amazing reality.
yeah, and actually, it's the initial idea. I was starting a book years ago where, and it's something that I put aside. It wasn't quite jiving at the time, but
Hmm.
like I say, I had been reading about the idea of implanting memories. what I had read, and I love science journals and scientific and stuff, and so I'll read a lot of those articles simply
Yeah, yeah.
because it makes for great sci-fi fodder for writing. Um,
Mhm.
but they were talking about being able to duplicate a person's personality and basically their engrams, their what it is that makes them who they are, their thoughts, their memories, uh, personalities, the whole thing, and integrate it into a computer system so that games would play out as if the person was really doing it. And of course, was there was conjecture that just to actually test what people would actually do in certain situations.
Yeah.
And of course, I took it to the next level and thought it would make a great gaming, platform. What if you could play and the system knew who you were and knew how to, how to what things would actually affect. So,
Interesting. And you use
and of course,
science
in
journals?
this case, there's yeah, I read a lot of scientific articles online and find just things that I think are kind of cutting edge and fascinating that I could actually turn fiction. So, and I have different articles like things like time travel and interdimensional travel and things like that. Just again, stuff that is fringe science, but is stuff that scientists out there are taking seriously enough that when I write about it, it doesn't feel like I'm just full of crap.
Hmm. Might this be a game of the future, you think?
Oh, I sure hope so. As long as they don't try to use it for the purposes that they do in the book. So, and a little
Oh.
backstory on the character actually, um, because he's dying, his father's been, having him use these games for all this time or play these games, and it's an internal system, so the memory on the system has never had to be wiped. It's
Mhm.
there's no legality behind it or anything. They don't have to worry about privacy laws. So all of Packard's gaming memories and his personality and everything from day one
Ooh.
has been stored in this database. And so at some point, Packard's involved in a really tragic accident. He's left brain dead, and the story really begins when Packard's father and a colleague who is developing medical nanotechnology get together to use the medical nanotech and the memories that have been stored in this quantum database
Mhm.
and reboot Packard's brain. So, and it's when the nanotech and the quantum database combine that it creates something new and something that Packard and his friends will have to face.
Wow, that is such a pull of a story. That's such a pull of a story. It sounds very, very intriguing and very, very almost hyper realistic as well to think because now with the technology advancing, nanotechnology really right there on the corner, and a lot of science fiction no longer being so much fiction, but more so how much funding is required to make it a reality.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just makes you think, like, you might be writing science fiction now, but in a couple of years, that might be a manual to the kind of video games that are gonna be played.
Wouldn't it be fun to look back and say, "Yeah, I mean, The Simpsons predict things all the time. Why not, one of my books, right?"
And to think that since you play a lot of games and you write a lot and you do a lot of voice acting, that it goes hand in hand. And humor me this, when you first started writing, did you ever picture yourself doing your own voice acting, for your own books?
No, not in a minute. No, not for a minute, I didn't. Uh, I've been doing both for a long time, but I never really thought about combining them, and, it, yeah, it just feels like a natural fit. I've been doing voices and voice acting for so long, so to be able
Mhm.
to do the character voices and, I mean, really, if you have the ability to do it, who really knows their character's inner dialogue and their monologue and their motivations, better than the writer, really? So, figured I might as well give it a shot.
Was it complicated trying to like, focus on a singular, voice and thought for the character, because when you're thinking about a character, there's so many different perspectives. Like, well, he might be thinking this, or she might be thinking that. He might be saying this. He might be saying that. How do you figure out? Okay, this is the final decision that I'm gonna make based off of this current situation.
Well, when I'm recording, so if I'm talking voice, there's voice in the book, which is just kind of like how the tone is laid out. But we're talking voice acting, right?
Yep.
Okay. So as I'm doing that, I actually record several takes of certain
Mm.
certain things, and I'll record the whole session. So what a 20-minute chapter generally ends up being like an hour and 5 hour and 10 once I'm done recording it, because
Mhm.
I'll several takes of the same phrase, sometimes the same word, just to make sure I get it right. Especially when it's an emotional scene, I've got who's going through some high emotion, whether it be anger or fear or sadness, whatever it is it's easy to kind of not do it justice if you do it incorrectly. So, who is my editor,
Mhm.
also do a quality run through and make sure everything sounds right. And every once in a while, she'll say, "So that word you said, it says that this person said it grimly, but they sounded awfully happy when you were saying the phrase." So it's helpful having an extra set of ears to go. And since she's an editor, she listens like an editor too. So it's super useful.
That's so intriguing because I totally forgot that there's editors for writing, but there's also editors for the voice part as well, especially how you mentioned where they're supposed to have a specific tone, cadence, or maybe even a pacing, and to have somebody be there to actually let you know that it wasn't up to what you wrote, or at least what they understood, because as you mentioned, you are the author, you created them, and you would know. But if somebody is, reading the story along and being like, "Hey, this doesn't kind of lined up," you might have to do a couple takes again on that.
Yep, it's super helpful. And that's why I do more than one take.
Mm,
I'll have although usually all in by the time she listens to it, I've got it
mhm.
down to what I think. Every once in a while, I'll leave certain things where I'll have 2 or 3 options for her to listen to, but it generally by listening to it, it's done. And I feel like I need to rethink that sometimes, because there are times she'll say, you that should be," then I have to go back and redo it, which I'd much rather have it be perfect, as close to perfect in the end anyway. So I encourage her to be as honest as possible when it comes to those.
And do you ever think that because, for example, some people when they have to do takes over and over again, they get burnt out. Like, oh, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. It's not coming out how it does in my head. Do you ever feel like when you do things like that, it kind of brings you back to when you're playing a video game or a puzzle game, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and like it just doesn't quite fit until you do it at maybe 149th time, and then you slap it on there, you just finish the recording, you press stop, and it's like, man, this, beating
Oh,
this
yeah.
this insert video game character here, boss here, wasn't as hard as doing this recording. Do you ever feel like there's some sort of like synergy or similarities between those?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, so much so. Sebastian, I think his first, I think I've done a couple of interviews with him.
Yes.
Is that okay? Yeah, and I really enjoyed listening to him, by the way. He's not only well spoken about games, but the dude's clearly really smart, and you guys have some really good synergy going on when you're talking. So
Mhm.
but I remember him talking about perseverance, and playing the games and persevering through certain. And I honestly, I think it really is interesting to think about how gaming has shaped our way of things or responding to things. And I think, like you said, that's super insightful, honestly, because I think someone who's an avid gamer, you have to be used to the idea that you're gonna do things repetitively.
Yep.
And sometimes every time you do it before, it is gonna be so bad or so boring or so frustrating, but when you finally get it, just the payoff is so much better. So
And, before we continue, I do wanna give you an opportunity, to leverage everything that you do, whether it's your page, your website, your book, your materials. Let everybody know when they watch this later on where they can go to support you because you've done so much, and I just want everybody to support you as much as possible.
I appreciate that. Yeah, rodrg.com. And we have my wife and I actually we own a publishing company. It's called EpiphanyMill, epiphanymill.com. Epiphany is a weird word. I'll spell it. It's EPIPHANY MILL is the whole thing. EpiphanyMill.com. It's our little publishing company. And then we actually have for products, we started doing merchandise like mugs and some stuff that supports what we're working with the publishing, and it's the Epiphany
Mhm.
Mall. So of course I thought that was very clever. We have Epiphany where that's concerned as well. Um, but yeah, it's the main website, Rodar, will bring you back to it. But the publishing company, like I say, Epiphany Mill, is where pretty much everything can be found, including other authors that we have. That I mean, there's some I'd hate to someone just come to my website when in reality there's more than just what I've done there.
Mhm. And you mentioned earlier, now that we're back to the regularly scheduled programming, you mentioned earlier that you aren't necessarily looking to pick up, just anybody, that you're looking at focusing on developing the talent that you have already at Epiphany Mall.
Yeah, right now we're I mean, and I never like to say that we're, there's it's a never say never type of thing. If the right person came along with the right product, I mean, we certainly would consider uh, um, looking at material. Full service, not a vanity press, so we're not like no charge. We cover the cost of book covers and editing and
Mhm.
everything else. If we do an audiobook, we're not charging them for whatever. There's this is meant to be a product, so which does make it more costly on our end. So that's why we're a little bit slow to um, the roster up. But at the same time, as you had said, my main focus is making sure that the authors that we do have are getting the right attention, and nobody kind of slips through the
Mhm.
cracks. Nobody feels like they're just not getting what they deserve out of it. So if we because they're going to be a part of the family, so
And
it's important.
do you have specific, like, genres? If somebody were to reach out to you, do you have specific genres where you would
You broke up
be, you know
pretty.
Oh, do you have, like, specific genres that you would be leaning towards more than any specific other genres?
Not really. I think the one thing we're not really doing nonfiction. As long as it's fiction and it's something that that there's an audience. We've never done romance or anything like that. I'm not opposed to it, but we've had detective fiction. We've got some superhero stuff coming out. We've got young adult novels. We even have a horror imprint that and the imprint is like
Mm.
random or Penguin is to Random House. An imprint just carries uh, certain styles. If you probably know that, but if you didn't, that's they cover certain styles. So we have a horror imprint called Boneyard Tomes that will be handling
Mm.
horror novels down the road as well. So as far as genres go, we're pretty open to explore directions. Like I say, as long as there's a mark. And that's a tough thing to say because honestly, market for everything. And I always tell
Right.
authors that work on what your passion is because there really is a market for everything. There is someone who wants to read everything that's done. And, it isn't always necessarily the biggest market, but that doesn't matter. If you're writing from your heart and you're writing passionately, then that audience will recognize that.
And since you do a lot, I did wanna ask you because you are the chief creative officer, you do authoring, you write, you publish, you also act. voice act, excuse me. Uh, which part of the writing process or the creation process do you prefer? Is it the overseeing? Is it the writing? Is it being in the studio recording? Is it getting feedback from editors or even feedback from the readers or the audio listeners? What is your actual favorite part? You can be subjective and biased, no judgment.
Easy answer would be yes. All of them. Uh, if I was forced to narrow it down, that's a hard thing. I love the writing. I love developing characters. To me, there's something about world building, and I had a conversation with my mom years ago about the nature of God or a God. Something where you
Mhm,
would say free will given, and not going spiritual or anything, as much as saying that it's interesting once you create a character in a book. If you're true, and I know that you've done some writing, and I actually intend to on checking out your you have is it 2 books right now, or is there more in the because I was
it's a little
looking at
bit
the
more,
what you have.
but I don't write as much as you. I write small little short stories.
No, I'm actually it's the Ascending and the Descending book. Those are the 2 that I had seen, but I'm excited to see to look into that. But as you probably know, writing this, once you create a character and once you have given them likes and dislikes and personality traits and strengths and weaknesses, you're kind of bound by those parameters that you've set.
Mhm.
It's like programming a video game.
Yes.
Once you've created the video game, you're bound to the parameters of that game. You can't just change the rules on the fly, or if you do, at least there has to be if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yes.
So in writing, it's very much the same. You've created constraints that that the characters have to live. You now, as the creator, have to live by as well. And there's something really challenging in that. I have an exercise that I like to do, and I'll take characters that I have established,
Mhm,
and I'll take a classic piece of literature.
mhm.
Could be Moby Dick, it could be Homer's The Iliad, it could be whatever. And I'll take my character and I'll flip to a page and I'll start writing my character in from a certain spot, like they just got magically transported there. And I'll try to write in the original
Mm.
author's voice for a while. It could be Mark Twain, it could be, Edgar Allan Poe, but I'll try to write in their voice to make it feel like it's seamless. And but it taught me a lot about just being able to switch tones and voice as you're going.
Do you find that doing that exercise increases your capabilities as an author, as well as increases understanding the individuality of your characters when you're doing your own writing?
Very much so, and I think it's been good for me because it has also kind of forced me to assess, or to really kind of dig into what was in the head of the author at the time too, and the care
Mm,
and what their intent was for the characters that I'm now kind of interacting with. It's different than reading because now you're writing about characters that have already been established and trying to stay true to that, like not just the author's voice, but the actual
mhm.
character's motivations too.
Well, that's actually a pretty cool exercise, actually trying to put yourself in the author's shoe and not one up them, but actually trying to take your character and make it a part of the story and see how it would portray. Now, when you do that, does the story get changed at all, or
Typically, yeah, because it's by inserting that character, um, I have to consider what the character feels now suddenly being there in those circumstances, depending on whether it's dangerous or uncomfortable, whatever it is. And then, of course, the characters that are around them, how they're going to respond to it as well. Because suddenly what was happening for them is suddenly thrown off by just having something change that dramatically. And that's always the one factor that is the constant in doing it. It
Mhm,
doesn't matter what characters I'm putting in, but there's always that reaction by the existing characters to suddenly having someone or something show up that they weren't expecting, that doesn't really fit the narrative, which is again part of the it's a constant, but it's part of the fun. So
so would you say that by doing so, you're almost creating a space-time continuum?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's creating kind of a paradox in a way, like, taking someone who doesn't belong where but yeah, it would be like another timeline altogether.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so intriguing because I was looking at your website and, you put this amazing question on there that I really would like to know the answer to is, where do you get your ideas from?
Um, a lot of it I think is being inspired by reading, and, it could be another author's work that I just think, "What if they had gone this direction instead? Um, what if the characters were what if this was the world they were in instead?" There's a lot of things I can look at, um, and it's funny, I'm the car the there's that Marvel series that's out, right now, and I think they're getting a 2nd season, but it's called What If? And
Ah,
those were
yes.
always as a kid, those were always one of my favorite comic books, because it took the normal and it basically turned it on its ear, and it said, "Okay, so here's how everything works, but what if this was a little different?" And that whole idea was great to me, and I think that's why there are certain video games that honestly, they play out so much more like that depending on I love the idea that you can use different characters, you can put
Mhm,
them in
mhm,
different situations, um, and, so as far as where the ideas come from, I really think I wouldn't really be able to narrow it down or pinpoint one certain place, but I'm inspired by media, by the books I read, by the games I play, by movies I watch, and it's just you start to think, "What if this was different? What if this character was doing something differently?" Or, just it could be a simple phrase that inspires an entire thought. Um, I think about where did Packard come from, and I know that Packard, the indGame series,
mhm,
um, it really came from a series of thoughts over time, a series of ideas that, that I had had that I really didn't act on because I just never felt like they were complete, and yet I always thought of them as individual concepts and then suddenly kind of overlaid them into something that was so much better. Have you ever played around in Photoshop? It's like putting the layers together. One layer may not be impressive on its own, but
yeah,
then
yeah,
you layer it in with, with a transparent background, and you've got something completely unique, and that's just, that's been the fun part of it. So, but, I do actually, I and it's one of those things I think, I would love to give a nod. I had a creative writing teacher when I was in high school. His name was Sid
mhm.
Waller, and Mr. Waller, every day when we would go in, and I'm old as hell, but, this was before PCs and before, fonts, before you were typing in fonts, and, so Mr. Waller, we would go into class and up on the blackboard or yeah, it was a chalkboard actually. He would have scribbled out in a different script every time, a different font, if you will, the 2 words, "What if?" and a question mark, and that was it. And it was up on the board, "What if?" And that was how he encouraged us to think, um, when it came to formulating a new story, because what if can mean anything.
Mhm. Man, that's so intriguing. So he enabled you to think in outside the box, outside the construct of you create your character, now they're locked in, and enables you pretty much to grab your characters and place them into parallel universes in other people's stories.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that was I came up with that exercise way back then, taking characters and unique characters and putting them into situations that they just didn't belong in. So I feel like I was already playing around in the multiverse um, when I was a kid. So it was a good
And
time.
uh, when you said that you feel like you were playing in the multiverse, do you mean like an actual universe of like multitude, or what do you mean by the multiverse?
The literary multiverse. I didn't see um, boundaries between literary works. So,
Mm.
like if you were to say Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, something, crazy like that, or Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I know, and those are real books, and to
Mhm,
think
mhm.
that somebody has said, well, what if zombies existed in Pride and Prejudice? What if Abraham Lincoln lived at a time where there was vampires? So to take something that exists and then to say that in literature there really aren't any boundaries.
Right.
I mean, of course, there's the legal boundaries. I can't go and put Mickey Mouse and Superman in the same story together and expect not to have Disney and Warner Brothers both come after me at the same time. I don't need that, but I think you know what I'm saying. There's just
Mhm,
to think that that literature itself, and this is actually one of my underlying themes in my overreaching body of work that I'm working on,
mhm.
is that literature itself is the multiverse. Um, and that the stories that we hear, the stories that we read, the tales that we tell, they are all just this overreaching, larger multiverse. DC has its multiverse, Marvel has its multiverse, but they all fit into the same one as far as literature is concerned. They can all kind of tie together. Uh, does that make sense?
No, that makes so much sense, the way that you strung it together. A true work of art, a true work of art. But that makes me think about, when you sent me your bio, you described that in 2013 you had your hand at, publishing, and it wasn't so much of a positive experience, and it turned you away from writing, and it enabled you pretty much to set up your, publishing company now. So I'm not sure, are you able to share what ended up happening that made you turn away from writing and then create your own company?
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't the publisher wasn't a bad publisher. It's in fact,
Mhm,
and the publishing we got a publishing contract for a book series that we were intending on writing. The first book I think was good, um, and but we were going to be writing a series. They at that point wanted steps out of us. Um, the uh, the publisher wasn't bad. They were mostly hands off, so it there wasn't any real involvement in marketing or anything that I saw that was actually active or proactive in making anything happen.
mhm.
And and then of course it was unfortunate, but the author relationship broke down as well. We found that it wasn't going to be sustainable, and so between that that honestly was the harder part of it. And then of course the publisher just not really being active in the process. I thought I could do better for someone. I could, and again, not to disparage the publisher. I just learned what I wanted out of a publisher, and
Mhm.
it wasn't that. I wanted more out of a publisher, and I thought there has to be more authors like myself who are just um, looking. I don't even know if I want to say looking for more, but just looking for better representation. And I feel like there are, I mean, for me, as much as I had been involved in the industry for years already, even when
Mhm.
2013 rolled around, it was very discouraging to find myself not feeling supported as an author. Here you get a contract, you're excited, and I've heard of game developers doing the same thing. They get a contract to develop a game, and then suddenly
Mhm.
it's, just it's not going the direction they thought, and they give up. It's just like, oh, this clearly isn't for me. But not all representation is equal, and I thought I want to do better. I don't want to be the reason someone gets discouraged or gives up on what they're doing because I didn't do right by them. So
Mm. Okay, that makes sense.
I know that was pretty long-winded, but yeah, I just I would like to do better by our talent, our extended family, our writers, our artists. I was speaking with another a colleague recently, and the
Mhm.
question came up about artists. Do you have artists that you just tell, hey, do this or do this? Um, and I think when it comes to any art and we're talking about video games, it's the same thing. You wouldn't want to take someone who really loves developing first person shooters and tell them, hey, by the way, you're going to develop a Sims game. There's going to be no no violence involved. There's not going to be any guns or, and they're like, like I know how to do it, but it isn't necessarily my favorite thing to do.
Mhm.
I feel like when possible, um, let the artist create the art they enjoy, and it'll be evident in what you get out of it. So I have cover artists that I'll have certain cover artists do one type of cover versus another. For the indGame series, incidentally, I've actually done my own cover art, which I was real pleased with, and
Oh, damn.
yeah, it turned out pretty good. And my son, he actually is Packard Campbell on the cover of all of the books, or the first one right now, and actually the second one is I finished most of the artwork already. But my son is the model for the main character, and then I've got a whole group of other cast members and people. I've even taken some of my beta readers and given them roles as characters on the back of the upcoming books. So it's been pretty fun. But the artwork, having done that myself, I'm real proud of that. I think I just totally squirreled and went in a whole different direction from your original question, though.
Oh, no, no, that is completely fine because that was leading up to my next question, um, which was how much of a relief is it to actually have your wife be the CEO of your publishing company? Because since you mentioned that you wanted to have a publishing company that would do right to the authors, but you also want to have a focus on writing and voice acting a little bit more, how much of a relief is that for you to have her be the CEO?
Oh, that's such a good question, honestly, because and it was probably about 6 months ago that we actually made a change. When I started the company, I started off as the CEO, and she was doing editing and whatnot. It was a partnership, but not in the conventional sense where she had a traditional role.
Mhm,
And about 6 months ago, we had a heart to heart and said, it was definitely it was an important conversation to have, and we talked about her taking over because I was just spread too thin, and I love to create, and I love to work with the creators, and I love to, whether it be the writing or the
mhm.
cover art or the voice acting or whatever else. These are things I love. They, for lack of a better term, they feed my soul.
Yes.
Um, and somehow being in the driver's seat, um, of the company, as much as it felt great getting the business off the ground,
Mhm,
um, it still wasn't my dream to run it forever. To have it and to know that it exists, and to know that as authors come on board, we can do a good job for them. That was wonderful. But to say that I was going to be running it all the time and always be involved in that process, that it started to wear, especially where the creative aspect was concerned. It's juggling, it's how am I going to do all of this at the same time? And but to pass that specific torch to her and to watch her run with it, and now be able to say she's handling the accounting aspect, and she's handling a lot of the things that I was trying to do, wear all of those crazy hats at once. Boy, when you said how much of a relief is it? Again, answer yes. all all of the relief, and she's great. When I don't know if you've ever watched Star Trek, the original Star Trek stuff, but
Mhm.
we have said it, but other people have commented to us about it as well. I am Kirk, very much. I am Kirk. I am the fist in the air when there's an injustice, and I run into, the injustice. I must stop this, and don't really
Yeah.
think about what's happening. And she is very much my Spock, who stands back going, should probably consider this first, shouldn't we? Or we talk about this. And but it's that balancing act that I was trying to do all at once, and I realized we already bring such balance to what we do anyway. Letting us kind of share the duties in the company, it really created a better balance all the way around.
Wow, that's so important to have, and As I wrap up these last few questions, I do want to ask you, because you've had so many insightful comments, as well as so much to speak about what you're currently doing. I also wanted to ask you, because you mentioned a couple of authors earlier on that you put your characters into their world.
Uh-huh.
Do you have a specific one, two, and three favorite authors of all time?
Michael Crichton, number one. Um, it does get tough because it's like asking someone what their favorite and I've watched you do this with folks, what are your 3 favorite video games or,
Yep,
something like
yep.
that. It's tough. You can pick out your absolute favorite, and Crichton, just the way he wrote, the subject matter, it very much jives with what I've done. Philip K. Dick, he wrote, he's the guy who wrote like Total Recall and Minority Report and Blade Runner, things like that. Philip K. Dick is definitely one of them, one of the top 3. And I think once I get there, then the third spot is really difficult because
Yeah.
there are so many. Like, I love Mark Twain, I love Edgar Allan Poe. I have to say, though, and it has influenced, this author has influenced so much of what I've been doing now, simply because I hadn't been exposed to H.P. Lovecraft in the past.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because the more I read about H.P. Lovecraft, he wasn't someone I'd really want to know myself, but his writing is scary as hell. So, um, so favorite authors, I guess it doesn't have to be favorite people. He wouldn't
Right.
necessarily fit there. But favorite work, favorite authors, the guy is just he's influenced a lot lately of the directions that I've gone as far as just being able to, or what scares people, what 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 are the foundations of our fears?
Mm. And now, since this is a gaming based, I do want to ask, not your favorite games, but since you are an adult that plays game, what game do you find yourself playing the most when you have the time? The most, whether it's hours, attention, intensity, whichever one that's like you have to tell yourself, don't put that much, time into this. You got other stuff to do.
Well, now, again, I think this was when you talked about this with Sebastian. There's
Mhm.
phone games, and if I'm talking phone games, I'll pick up solitaire or gin rummy
Oh,
or
okay.
something silly on the phone. Um, but actual console gaming, sitting down and actually gaming,
Mhm.
um, I love the Infamous games.
Ooh.
Really love Infamous. And to me, Infamous is like just another. It plays very much like the Arkham series.
Mhm, mhm.
I love the puzzle solving, but it's not just a puzzle game. You have to occasionally solve a puzzle. You occasionally have to have dexterity by the button mashing events, and so Arkham is definitely in my top as far as ones that I could just get lost in. But I feel like that the Infamous series is probably my very favorite. I've had it in sitting next to my console for a few years, but I still need to play the Spider-Man game that came out a few years ago that was like super highly acclaimed, and I have a feeling it would probably be a similar experience.
Okay, so you prefer the single player games that allows you to immerse into the story and actually, uh, be the character for a bit?
When I'm alone, yes. Although there's an old console game, or an old it was actually in the arcades, and it was called Gauntlet. Um, and if you've ever played Gauntlet, you play as the warrior, the elf, the wizard, or the Valkyrie, and it's where the warrior needs food badly. That's where that came from. And but it's a more of a cooperative game. So you
Mhm.
band together as 4 different characters, anywhere from 1 to 4 characters, and band together and play.
Mm.
And it's a dungeon crawler. And I think the original dungeon crawler, as far as like the arcade games is concerned, and I love that too. When I can sit down and actually play with my kids or my wife or something, having the opportunity to do that. And I do miss cooperative games. I don't. It's just there's so many single players, solo outings at this point.
Yep.
So We had the Sony, we have the PlayStation, and we had the Move system.
Mhm,
So we used
mhm.
my kids and I would go and do like sports champions, I think it was called something. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, but it was on the PlayStation Move. So I don't know. Gaming is just so useful, and it can be wonderful if you're alone and needing just to chill, to unwind, to take out aggression on something. Um, but it can also be fantastic for bringing families together. I think that there's too many people of earlier generations that looked at it as a waste of time, when in reality, it really is what you make of it.
Mm. Oh, you said it there. And with that, that brings me to my last question, because since you do so much, I do want to know what comes next. What is next for Rod R. Garcia? What do you have coming down the pipeline? Because I know you have to have something coming down the pipeline.
Oh, for sure. My the sequel to indGame is actually moving along beautifully. Like I say, the cover for the second book is actually almost done, and it's really only waiting for a couple of models to get photographed so I can add them into the back cover. The book itself is gosh, almost a third done. So and maybe not quite that far, but I'm getting darn close to that. But it's and and we've actually set, because they're young adult novels, we've
Mhm.
actually set a 9-month release period between each book. So the next book will come out in August, and then 9 months after that, book three. And it looks like at this point, it's either going to be four or five. I had originally slated it to be a trilogy, and just realized that there was a lot more story to tell than I had given myself credit for in the beginning, or that I had expected. So it's but yeah, that book is coming. Um, Definitely the audiobooks for the entire series, and I'm doing audiobooks for the other authors that we have as well. So I figured I
Mhm.
might as well just keep it in house if I can. I have plenty of people that I can reach out to if I need to go another direction, but I feel like it's fun. It's like I say, it kind of feeds my soul as I go. And who knows if these ever got picked up. I, this is one of those pipe dream things, but honestly, if it ever got picked up
Dream.
as a series, or as a movie series, TV series, anime, my wife and I were talking about it today. In game would actually make a really um, because of all of the characters involved in it. But I would love to do like a Stan Lee and be involved in the be one of the characters, or Stephen King. They do their little cameos. I would love to. So maybe throw my hand in at acting one day too.
Hey, you never know. You make a wish, and who knows? It's Christmas in a couple of a week. Santa might grant that wish. You never know.
Speaking of Santa, he's actually a character in the books. So
Hey, look at that
he was
guess.
involved in one of the games, and so Packard gets to deal with Santa and his murder elf Steve. And it's so weird when I said that out loud.
Oh man, this is great. Thank you so much, Rod, for
Thank you.
joining me, for joining the channel. I want to give you the opportunity once again to let everybody know where they can support you, where they can go to either purchase your material, where they can, just give you some, likes, some comments, some following, whether they can support you with money, whether they can support you as a fan, however and whenever.
I appreciate that. It's again, I won't spell them this time, but it's rodrgarcia.com is my personal website. The publishing company is EpiphanyMill.com. And then all of our merchandise is on EpiphanyMall.com. Actually, any of the three will link to the others. So depending on where you are, you can always kind of find your way around. But yeah, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for all of that information, all that wonderful creativity, the parallels that you gave us, of the what if lessons that you bestowed upon us from your teacher eons ago. Thank you again for giving us so much of the relief factor of having somebody by your side that's willing to take some of your burden off of you
Mm.
and let you be a creative genius that you are. Just so much to distill and dissect from that. I had such a pleasure. I implore everybody, make sure to check out Rod. Make sure to like his material if you can purchase what he comes to offer, as well as everything else that he's coming afterwards. And if anybody is interested in any of his work on a collaboration, or whether you're a big ticket, you heard what he said that he wants to do. So you already know how to reach out to him. Other than that, if nothing else, I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I will try to do my best to bring more content like this. Rod, thank you so much once again for giving the time out of your busy schedule in your creation process to come out and just have a blast with me.
Thank you, Nico. It's been a pleasure. It really has. I'm glad you. Thank you for taking the time for doing this as well. I know this is kind of your gig, but still, thank you.
No worries. If nothing else, enjoy yourself, take care, be safe, and I hope that creation process continues as progressing as smoothly as you have thought it out so far, and hopefully no major hiccups on the way.
I hope not too.
All right, take care and have a good night.
Thank you.